everyone, and welcome to the Blessed Life Week 27. Hope that you're having a great week so far, and I hope your summer is going great. So let's get right into it. Now, the scripture comes from 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 4. Moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering of the saints. This is entitled More Heart Surgery. Beyond overcoming a selfish heart, beyond avoiding a grieving heart, there is a third heart adjustment that we must make in the area of giving. With God's help, we must develop a liberal or generous heart. Now, I'm not using the term liberal in the political sense. I'm talking about liberality, the practice of being generous and free with our material possessions. Look once again at this verse about giving to the poor from the passage in Deuteronomy 15. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your winepress. From what the Lord has blessed you with, you shall give to him. We may not have threshing floors or wine presses nowadays, but we are still called to give liberally from that which God has blessed us. We're not to be stingy in our giving. We are to be generous. That's why we must cultivate a liberal heart. This goes against the grain of our fallen natures, but it is perfectly consistent with the new natures we received when we gave our lives to Jesus. Often I say, I was born selfish, but I was born again generous. The key to walking in the new nature rather than the old one is simply a matter of renewing the mind. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, Romans 12:2. Mind renewal brings transformation. My new nature, the spirit man inside of me, wants to be generous, but I must learn to renew my mind in this area. I must come to trust that God will take care of me if I'm a generous giver. My old nature used to try to figure out how I would manipulate circumstances in my favor. Of course, that's the attitude of a taker, not a giver. Selfishness tries to manipulate God or make deals with him where giving is concerned. But a liberal-hearted person gives quickly and generously because he knows it all belongs to God and he trusts in God's ability to take care of him and bless him. To no credit of my own, this is a work God has done in my heart. And I'm writing this book to testify to you that it works. God is faithful. Some time ago, Debbie was talking with a pastor and his wife who were staying in our home. They could clearly see that we were living the blessed life, so the pastor asked my wife, "Why do you think God has blessed you so much?" Debbie thought about it for a moment and answered, "I think it has to do with Robert's heart. When Robert got saved, God so changed his heart that he would give away everything we own if he sensed God telling him to do it. As a matter of fact, he's done it several times because he loves God and he loves people. The Lord has given him a heart that wants to give generously to God's people and God's work. I can't begin to tell you how much joy giving has brought to our lives. Being givers in God's kingdom is the most fun we've ever had. It has resulted in a more exciting life than we've ever could have imagined." A final work of the heart is the next section. When we allow God to change us in this area, there is one more work we must do in our hearts. We have to develop a grateful heart. Look back at Deuteronomy 15 one last time. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this thing today. Why did God instruct the Israelites to remember that they had been slaves? Because it will fill their hearts with gratitude for what he has done for them. From time to time in worship or in my quiet time, God reminds me of my past. He doesn't do it to produce guilt or condemnation. He knows it produces deep gratitude. I was such a mess. I was on a road of heartache and self-destruction. And then he saved me and put me on the road to life and of blessing. And when I think about that, my heart overflows with thankfulness. When we allow God to remind us that we used to be slaves and that everything we have is by his gracious hand, it will help us to be grateful. And when we are grateful, we're generous. Genuine gratitude to God is a rare and powerful thing. One time when I was preaching in a very small church on the subject of giving, a friend of mine, a liberal giver, came along to support me in prayer as I preached. He also was praying for the people who were hearing the message. that God would do a work in their hearts in the area of giving. At the end of the message, I said, I want each of you to pray and ask the Lord what He wants you to give tonight. At that point, as my friend began thinking about what God might want him to give, he realized he hadn't brought his wallet or checkbook with him. To his dismay, he discovered that he had nothing at all to give in the offering. He prayed, Lord, what can I give? I don't have any money with me. Immediately, the Lord reminded him that he had on a brand new pair of very expensive shoes. The Lord said, I want you to give those shoes to the pastor of this church. The pastor of the little church would probably never have purchased such a nice pair of shoes for himself, even if he could have afforded them. He probably would have not. He probably could not. At that point, my friend began going through all those mental gymnastics one goes through when God asks you to do something unusual. What if they're not the right size? Will he be offended? What will people think? Am I just going to walk out of here with my socks? Finally, he made the decision. The Lord spoke to me, so I'm going to do it whether it makes sense or not. He went over to the pastor's wife and asked, what size does your husband wear? It was the very same size he was wearing. Needless to say, my friend rode home with me in his stocking feet. But he was blessed and full of joy, and so was the pastor. Several years later, I heard the story of a man who was in the congregation that very same night. He had just recently come to know Christ. Prior to being born again, he had squandered all of his money and essentially was broke. At offering time, he said, Lord, what can I give? I have so little money, but my heart is so full of gratitude for what you have done for me. As he told it, the Lord gave him an idea of taking out a life insurance policy and making the church the beneficiary. So he arranged for a $100,000 policy. Just a few years later, he passed away, and the church received that money, a larger gift than he could possibly have given any other way. Stay tuned for the food for thought.